Extra points for those of you attending class today. Thank you so much for being here. Good morning. House Democrats are focused on kitchen table issues that will grow the middle class. We continue to talk about these issues because that's what the American people have asked us to do. We're not going to be distracted this week by election deniers trying to settle partisan scores, COVID conspiracy theorists with famous last names, or even former presidents admitting that they committed crimes on television. The American people have asked us to work on lowering costs, creating jobs, and defending reproductive freedom. And they want us to push back against policies that threaten the economic recovery under President Biden. House Republicans, when they aren't appeasing the conspiracy caucus or defending the twice impeached leader of their party, have rolled out a three-part economic plan that would make life harder for middle class families. Ending Social Security as we know it, tax cuts for billionaires and the wealthiest corporations, and devastating cuts to things like veterans health care, Head Start, and cancer research. And later this week, House Republicans will once again have a chance to show their constituents they are not beholden to extremists in their party by joining Democrats in our efforts to defend abortion and pass the Women's Health Protection Act. They need to show the American people that they're focused on the most pressing issues facing the American public instead of putting extremists ahead of the middle class. Vice Chair Ted Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. When Democrats were in control, we put people over politics and passed laws to grow our economy. We passed the American Rescue Plan to create good jobs. We passed the bipartisan infrastructure law to rebuild your roads and bridges and highways. And we passed the Inflation Reduction Act to fund renewable energy projects and to reduce the deficit. What are Republicans doing? Well, in Judiciary Committee, where I sit, they are having a wasteful hearing on a wasteful John Durham report that after 4 years, over $6 million and thousands of employee hours, essentially found that the FBI, in fact, had enough information to open a preliminary investigation into the Trump campaign. And thank goodness the FBI did that, because multiple Trump associates were convicted of federal crimes. What the Judiciary Committee really should be doing is focusing on a Democratic bill to pass an ethics law for the Supreme Court. Because we've learned today that it wasn't just Justice Clarence Thomas that got lavish gifts from a conservative billionaire and failed to disclose it. It was also Samuel Alito who got lavish gifts from a conservative billionaire and failed to disclose that. In addition, both justices violated federal law when they did not disclose their private jet travel, and they did not recuse themselves, even though both of these conservative billionaires had interests before the U.S. Supreme Court. One of them, in the Justice Clarence case, Thomas case, sat on the board of an organization that files briefs to U.S. Supreme Court, and it is simply outrageous that you now have Supreme Court justices who are violating all sorts of ethical rules that every other federal judge has to comply with. And with that, I yield back.
Questions?
What's your understanding of the situation with this Lauren Boebert impeachment resolution? Is this there's been some confusion over whether it would start a clock for a vote this week? Are you guys expecting to take some vote regarding impeaching President Biden from this vote resolution this week?
I think we have to be ready to vote for any number of fanciful ideas that the House Republican Conference comes up with. These are privileged resolutions. We don't control the timing. So we'll work with the whip's office and the leader's office, who will let us know on the Democratic side when it's time to vote. But I think what's very clear to the American public is whether it's Paulina Luna or Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene, these are individuals who still to this day question the results of a free and fair election in 2020. And they are trying to out MAGA and out extreme each other by pushing measures to impeach, expel, censure, whatever language they'd like to use. They're doing it with the sole focus of having the back of the former president. the twice impeached former president, they want to show their allegiance. That's what they do time and time again. That's how extreme they are. But let's talk for just a quick minute on the things that they are choosing not to talk about. The Women's Health Protection Act, defending abortion, ensuring that we have a tax code that is fair, that millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share. Those are the things that they don't want to talk about. They want to talk about censure and impeachment. They don't want to talk about lowering costs of everyday Americans. And that's unfortunate because those are the things that we know our constituents want to talk about.
Okay, and just to
Vice Chair, go ahead.
And sort of a follow-up to that, obviously, you've got both the Durham hearing today, as you mentioned, and the shift censure. There was a significant push by Democrats that it was a possibility that Donald Trump had colluded with Russia during the 2016 election, and that's sort of the gist of what Republicans are getting out of this shift thing. And it seems like now the investigations have run their course, and any sort of coordination between those two groups was not substantiated. So do Democrats regret holding that up as a narrative regarding the 2016 election and also to a certain extent its legitimacy?
What you just said is false. What the Department of Justice found in 2016, what happened is that the Russians interfered in the 2016 elections in a sweeping and systematic manner. The FBI had evidence that George Papadopoulos, foreign advisor to the Trump campaign, told Australian diplomats that the Russians suggested to the Trump campaign that the Russians would release anonymous information damaging to Hillary Clinton. Turns out the FBI was right. In fact, the Russians had hacked the DNC and caused the release of information damaging to Hillary Clinton. Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chairman, later publicly admitted he shared internal Trump campaign data with a Russian spy. And then the US Treasury Department found that this campaign data, which it quoted as sensitive internal Trump campaign data, made its way into Russian intelligence agencies. There is a phrase for what I just described, the facts I just set forth. It's called Russian collusion. That is what history shows, and we're not going to let you or MAGA Republicans revise it.
Yep. On the Lieu resolution today and the other privileged ones coming up, do you think Democrats should respond in kind by filing their own privileged motions for discipline related to members that Democrats have found objectionable?
Look, I think that you saw earlier the George Santos resolution. This is a Republican conference that is built on ensuring that George Santos stays in Congress. They need his vote. They showed that time and time again. We're not interested in a tit for tat. What we are interested in is lowering costs of everyday Americans. We want to ensure that the tax code is fair. We want to prevent cuts to the Veterans Administration and to Head Start and to NIH. I'll be going from here to the Appropriations Committee to do that work and to continue that work. Those are the things that we're interested in. We're not interested in filing privilege resolutions just for the sake of it. This is a group of election deniers who wants to have the back of the former president because he was mad last week that 20 of them didn't have his back. He made that public. He made his voice heard. And now you have a response. You have the floodgates opened of individuals who are proposing censures and resolutions in order to play politics. And we're focused on delivering for the American public just as we have in the past.
A number of Republicans are expected to vote against any impeachment resolutions brought up maybe this week or coming up after that. And you saw a number of Republicans vote against the initial censure resolution on Congressman Schiff. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, one title that Vice Chair Lieu and I don't share is Republican whip. So you'd have to talk to them on the vote count. But I think by any reasonable metric, these are ridiculous resolutions. They don't have a place. They don't follow process. These are individuals who are just trying to make the former president happy, and by introducing them, maybe they check that box. Maybe they'll use it for email political purposes. We just don't know. But we would hope, just like in the past, that there would be, reasonable Republicans, or where are these, moderate Republicans that we talk about, who go back home and they talk about, wanting to work together on issues, but they lock, stock, and barrel support George Santos being here, and they may support. Censures for Adam Schiff. We don't know where that moderate Republican is anymore. Ted and I used to serve with some of them, but I don't know if we recognize any of them these days. Thanks, Ryan.
Congressman, you mentioned the appropriations process, and we knew the debt ceiling issue was happening months before it happened, but it was still one of these situations where it was right up until the deadline before a resolution was made. As you go into this appropriations process right now, do you find hope that you're going to be able to find the bipartisan compromises necessary to get the appropriations process done by the end of September? Are you close there? Are you going to go to recess without making progress in that area, and it's going to be another deadline situation? I mean, just give us your overall sense of where these negotiations are.
It doesn't seem like we're making very much progress. I point you to Leader Hoyer's comments in the Appropriations Committee that were reported on. I spoke in the Appropriations Committee. We are completely ceding the appropriations process to the Senate at this point. The Senate is the only entity that is marking up to the agreed upon numbers. And as a result, House Republicans are, and again, this is just to get the votes so Speaker McCarthy can remain Speaker McCarthy. He has to make every promise he can, whether it's censures, resolutions, all of that, or undisclosed pieces of paper that have promises made on them. This is all to ensure that he remains Speaker. But they are marking to $120 billion lower than they agreed to 2 weeks previously. And so that doesn't make me feel good, because it clearly shows that the House and Senate numbers will be very different places. I'd be curious to see if they can get these bills off of the House floor, supporting drastic levels of cuts to so many vital programs. But we'll see, and we'll I think at some point eventually have to vote on what the Senate produces. And the House Republicans have taken the House completely out of the game when it comes to this. But we're going to keep focusing on what the impacts of the cuts that they're proposing actually mean. And so we're going to do that time and time again in the Appropriations Committee.
Does that pessimism make you think that a government shutdown is a real possibility then?
Well, we know that the law that was passed imposes reductions come January 1st if we don't have an agreement. The period between October 1 and January 1 is a little murky, but we're going to focus on getting our work done. But I don't feel optimistic that we're in a good place right now if House Republicans continue to want to cut $120 billion out of vital programs that they agreed to 3 weeks ago now. That doesn't bode well toward the collegiality, at least, that has tended to exist within the Appropriations Committee. It is not the same today.
Are you all hearing at all from the administration on 702? I know many Democrats want to reform, and even many of its income Republicans last did. Now, post indictment, a lot of them want to take a hacksaw to it.
Yeah, we haven't heard from. I haven't heard from the administration. I think we'll let the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence kind of guide those discussions as they have in the past on reauthorization. But when that comes forward, I assume that there will be bipartisan member briefings that we will avail ourselves to, and then proceed accordingly. But we will see where that ends up.
What would you want to see happen with that? You as well. At Wired, we're reporting that the FBI is allowed to buy my personal tracking data. They won't go to court. They couldn't get it, but they can buy it from a third party and track me and others. What do you think of that?
With-
Do you think that should be reformed?
Within the reauthorization process, we will, hear information in both open settings and classified settings on the tools that the Intelligence Committee has at their disposal. We will ask questions and provide our oversight, and then members will make decisions.
They refused to answer. Senate didn't tell last week.
Well, and some of this will be behind closed doors, and then some will be in open session. And then members, depending on the timeline for reauthorization that the majority proposes, members will react. Morning.
On a different topic, gender and identity obviously are something that we see becoming increasingly politicized, going to be part of probably the next election. We just came out with a poll saying 61% of Americans believe that gender should be identified only as man and woman, the sex that was identified on your birth certificate. What do you make of that? What do you make of sort of where we are right now with the concept of gender and identity, and especially for transgender Americans?
I think, and I think Ted and I both feel this from the perspective, we look at this from the perspective of being parents, primarily. Every child should have an opportunity to succeed, no matter how they identify. I appreciate, this is the first I've heard you talk about those numbers, but I've seen other numbers that over 2/3 of the American public don't feel that any type of discrimination is good. And so, we feel that these are discriminatory culture wars that Republicans keep stoking. They're going to do this time and time again within state legislatures, and you're seeing that language make its way to Congress strictly to discriminate against people for how they identify or who they love. Or what they want to read in school. Those are the things that Republicans time and time again feel give them a wedge. And it's how they support the culture wars, because they don't want to talk about women's reproductive health. They don't want to talk about lowering the costs of working families. Those are the things that they want to avoid. So they introduce all of these other topics. But at its core, we feel that the American public don't want individuals discriminated against. They want to go about their lives. They want to provide for their families. And they want to respect other people. And so I think that's the prism in which we view these issues.
Sure. America is about freedom. It's about the freedom to be who you are, and government shouldn't be interfering in family decisions or in people's decisions to be who they are. And I think that's what the American people have always believed. That's what makes our country great. We are about freedom, and we shouldn't be used big government to put in laws that restrict those freedoms.
Thank you.
Thank you.